The Gospel according to Luke, Advent Calendar, Day 8. Chapter 8. Seeds, Stories, and Storms. By now, Jesus was pretty famous, and people were following him everywhere. They traveled for miles and miles away. On foot, too. Imagine the smell. Ew. Just to get a glimpse of him. One day, he sat down to tell them a story. A farmer went out to scatter some seeds. He threw them far and wide. They went everywhere. Some landed on the path and gave the birds a tasty snack. Some landed on rocky ground and then died because they couldn't get to any water. Some landed among nasty, prickly weeds that strangled the seeds to death as they grew. But some landed on lovely brown soil and grew up to be tall and strong. The people who were listening didn't understand what Jesus was talking about. They were quite confused. What do you think he was saying? Then Jesus said, the seeds are like the things that God says. Sometimes people hear what God says, but then the devil comes along and makes them forget or stops them believing. Sometimes people hear what God says and they like it, but they don't let it make a difference in their lives. And if things get difficult for them, they don't listen to God anymore. Sometimes people hear what God says and they want to believe it, but they're too worried about money, happiness, fame, so there's no space left for God in their lives. But sometimes people hear what God says and live their lives by it. They work hard to learn more and grow closer to him. Then Jesus told a story about a lamp and a jar and a bed. Why would you light a lamp in a dark room, then hide it in a jar or sneak it under your bed? That'd be stupid, wouldn't it? You'd put it on a stand or hold it up high so that everyone who came in would be able to see. You see, you can't hide anything from God. He knows everything. He even knows what you're thinking right now. Listen carefully to what he says, and you'll do well. Then Mary, Jesus' mom, turned up with a few of his brothers, but she couldn't get anywhere near him because of all the swarming people. Annoying. Jesus heard that they were trying to get to see him, but he said something rather odd. My family is made up of people who listen to what God says and put it into practice. What do you think he was talking about? People were quite often confused by some of the things Jesus said. Is he saying family isn't important? Or is he saying family is really important? Or is he saying that actually everyone is his family if they love God? A few days later, Jesus decided he wanted to cross Lake Galilee. And since quite a few of his friends had been fishermen, they didn't mind at all. But they'd not been in the boat long when Jesus decided to take a nap. While Jesus was snoozing, everything went dark. The wind was howling and the boat started to fill with water. Who sleeps through a storm like that? His friends shook him awake. We're going to die! Help! Oh, Jesus, wake up! Jesus opened his eyes, stretched, and stood up. He looked around at the storm and said, Stop, waves! Stop, wind! And then sat back down again as the waves and wind calmed down. Everyone stared at Jesus. He stared back. Then he said, "Haven't you got any faith?" He just told the wind and the water to stop, they said to one another. And they did what he said. A little while later, they arrived on the other side of the lake. Jesus was only just getting out of the boat when a screaming man covered in chains fell at his feet. Freaky or what? The disciples kept their distance. This guy looked seriously weird, not to mention the fact that he didn't have any clothes on. Majorly awkward. Then he said, "Jesus, I know you're God's son. What do you want?" And Jesus said, "What's your name?" The man had been in a pretty bad place for a long time. He didn't even have a house to live in anymore, so he lived in a graveyard. Ew, creepy. The people had put chains on him to stop him from hurting himself. They all kept away from him. He was super scary. Do you remember? We met a man a bit like this guy back in chapter 4. The man in chapter 4 had an evil spirit living inside him. And this guy was just the same. That's why he had a major reaction to Jesus. The evil spirit inside the man knew that Jesus had the power to chuck him out. Anyway, so when Jesus asked what his name was, the man said, "Legion." Did you know Legion was the name for a big group of Roman soldiers? A legion could sometimes include up to 6,000 men. So saying that your name is basically lots of Roman soldiers is a bit odd. But if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. There wasn't just one evil spirit living in him, but lots and lots and lots. But you know, it didn't matter to Jesus how many evil spirits there were, because all he had to do was tell them, "Leave." Just before Jesus told the legion to go, they spoke to him. "Please don't send us where we'll be punished," they said. "Send us into those pigs over there instead." And strangely enough, that's exactly what Jesus did. The pigs suddenly rushed down the hill and ran straight into the lake and drowned. Ew. So why didn't Jesus just get rid of the demons and leave the pigs alone? Well, the short answer is he knew it wasn't the right time yet. God would defeat evil in the end. And for now, all he wanted was to heal people and set them free. The men who had been looking after the pigs couldn't believe what they'd just seen. They ran into town and told everyone. No one believed them, so they came to see for themselves. The very same man they'd left chained in the graveyard was completely normal. He even had clothes on, which was a major improvement. You'd think the people would have been amazed, but actually, they were just scared. So they asked Jesus to go away. They were properly freaked out. As Jesus and his friends climbed back into their boat, they heard, "Jesus, Jesus, wait for me. I'm coming with you." It was the man who'd just been healed, splashing his way through the water, trying to climb into the boat. "No, you're not," smiled Jesus. "Go home and tell as many people as you can about what God has done for you." As soon as the opposite shore came into sight, they saw a huge crowd. A man called Jairus was at the front of the crowd. He was desperate to see Jesus. His daughter was dying, and he begged Jesus to come and see her. They set off, and the crowds followed. One of the women in the crowd had been ill for 12 years. She had spent all her money and tried every idea, but she just kept on bleeding. It was horrible. Ooh, Jesus was her last resort. She'd heard he could do amazing things, and she believed he could do amazing things for her. She pushed and pushed her way through the crowd and just managed to touch the edge of Jesus' clothes with the tip of her finger. Even though everyone was pushing and shoving all around him, Jesus knew that someone had just touched his clothes. He stopped suddenly and said, "Who touched me?" His friends thought he was being a bit odd. "Everyone is pushing you. What are you talking about?" "No," said Jesus, "someone touched me. I felt power leave me." The woman came out from the crowd and knelt on the floor in front of Jesus. She explained, "I've tried everything. I've been ill for so long, but one touch of Jesus and I'm healed." "You're healed because of your faith," said Jesus. "Have peace from God." Meanwhile, Jairus had been waiting, worrying what was happening to his daughter. Then his worst fears were realized when he saw someone from his house running towards them. "She died. She's gone. Don't bother him anymore." But Jesus said, "Don't worry, Jairus. It's okay. Have faith, and she'll be well again." When they arrived at Jairus' house, everyone was crying, great big soggy tears and super loud waily sobs. The little girl really had died after all. Jesus went in with Peter, James, John, Jairus, and his wife. "She's not dead. She's just asleep," said Jesus. Everyone laughed at Jesus. They must have thought he was a little bit stupid. Clearly, she was very dead. But then Jesus held up the little girl's hand and said, "Get up." And right before their eyes, she stood up, alive and well. Everyone stared. They were speechless. Jesus looked around at them and smiled. "Give her some food," he said, "and don't tell anyone what has happened here today." Hasn't he done that before, telling people not to say what has happened? I'm sure he must have had a really good reason for it. Perhaps we'll find out in a bit. Maybe tomorrow. See you then.